Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Crypto News Podcast. It's your host, Matze. We are buzzing as always, still coming in hot from lovely Buenos Aires, Argentina. It's been an absolute treat here. Highly recommend coming in. If you've never been, stakes are unreal. I mean, everything is just world class, and especially November, December, the weather is all world. Probably never had as good as weather as we've had here. So very grateful and super happy. And I'm even happier to have today's guest on the show. Brandon Truong coming on the show today, co-founder and CPO of ZetaChain, the first universal blockchain, where he leads the development of the first universal blockchain for chain abstraction and interoperability. He also co-founded Yada, a social and SaaS startup, which was acquired back in 2020, while he was simultaneously holding leadership roles at Stanford, Udacity, and BuzzFeed. I think I pronounced Udacity. Regardless, I am terrible for pronunciations, but super pumped to have him on. Brandon, welcome to the show, my friend. How you doing this lovely morning?
I am doing great. Yeah, thanks for having me. And yeah, Udacity. I don't know why I am literally inept when it comes to pronunciation. I blame it on me being in French immersion back when I was young. So we learned everything, geography, history, math, everything but science we learned in French. So it's definitely a bullshit excuse on my end, but that's just sort of my get out of jail free card when it comes to my ineptness for pronunciation. But let's jump right into it. Let's start with your personal background here. Before you got into blockchain, you were doing a bunch of really cool things. You created and sold a startup. You're obviously a big product guy. Walk me through your love for products, your love for startups, a bit about that acquisition, and then we'll get into the crypto stuff. We'll get into everything ZetaChain after. Sure. Yeah. I mean, going way back, I was initially kind of a computer nerd. So doing hackathons in high school, that sort of thing, building websites for my friends. And that ended up turning into me working in startups pretty early on, doing hackathons. So that was all through high school. And when I got into college, I continued to do pretty similar stuff. So always working on projects with friends. And I ended up working on a project with my brother, Brian, and we ended up founding this startup called Yada. It actually started kind of in the automation content creation space, but then we ended up pivoting to something that was purely consumer facing, more a social app, also in content creation. And so we started that journey, I think in 2018, and ended up selling it at the end of 2020, pandemic times. And yeah, I mean, it was an incredible journey and very cool to work with my brother on that. And that's also where I started my foray more into design and product side, coming from more pure engineering and just hacking on stuff more on my own, more informally. And I guess in between, I was, working at a couple companies like Udacity and BuzzFeed. I had taken a couple years off in total, before school, after school. I ended up not finishing my degree ever, unfortunately, but things have worked out fine. And fast forwarding to 2021, I met Ankur, who was the kind of original founder of ZetaChain, and ended up joining kind of as the first teammate of the team, along with our CTO, Padru. And since then we've kind of been off to the races, and I'm sure we'll get into that too.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. You must have messed around with crypto before joining pretty much the founding team of ZetaChain. You must have been doing some degen shit back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I was more degen. I think as a high schooler, just starting to make a little cash, doing freelance work. And I ended up in high school, a number of my friends, including myself, were mining Bitcoin back in 2014, 2015. And I ended up selling all of it almost immediately.
Of course,
in that little bull run. But if I was a little more diamond hands, things might have been a little different.
100%.
But I've definitely been exposed to the space. A number of friends have been pretty deep in it for a long time since then, but I've never really dipped my toes in further than that, actually building in the space until ZetaChain.
Gotcha. Nice. I mean, that just a little caveat to everyone who says, I wish I would have
bought Bitcoin in, 2011, 2013, 2017. It's like, shut up. You would have sold it. Me too,
Yeah.
I've
Hindsight
told,
2020.
yeah, I've told the story many times in the pod. When I was in first year uni, which was 2013 for me, I went to school for sports management. We had a great little sort of cohort / degen group of underage sports gamblers. We were literally printing money, turning $100 into thousands of dollars multiple times. Just 'cause again, we had some edge, we had some inside. Anyways, the big story is that Bodog offered to pay out in Bitcoin, and you had a 2-to-1x payout in Bitcoin as well. So I could have got, $2,500 worth of Bitcoin or $2,500 worth of dollars, or excuse me, 5,000 worth of Bitcoin or 2,500 worth of dollars. And of course, would I take the dollars, and I had that Bitcoin in the account. It was there. I just anyways, I wouldn't be on this podcast right now. I'd be on a yacht and on the Amalfi Coast, but hindsight's 2020. Anyways, let's jump into it here. ZetaChain, walk me through the concept, give us the elevator pitch, walk me through the big bang, which is the universal blockchain concept. And then I got a bunch of fun questions coming your way because, again, this is so interesting. You guys have literally been moving and grooving, done some incredible work. But let's get it started with the elevator pitch and the universal blockchain concept.
Yeah. I mean, at a very high level, I think you can think of ZetaChain creating an internet-like layer for blockchains. So an analogy we use internally and the contributors is often thinking of blockchains kind of as countries, their own economies, their own social graphs, and there is not quite a layer. There's freight ships, for example, kind of like message passing, different ways of moving things around, but there's not this actual layer that in physical world allowed for this real globalization, which was the internet. We're thinking of kind of the equivalent for blockchains, if you're imagining them as countries or individual economies, to allow like an actually fluid environment to move through. And yeah, I'd be happy to talk more about like how that looks for a developer or user, but that's kind of the elevator pitch. And hopefully if ZetaChain can achieve that actual meta layer, internet-like layer, we can allow the same sort of like diversity and innovation that internet allowed for businesses. And for us, it's like businesses in Web3 space. So kind of the next evolution of that.
Yeah, well said. So just to sort of not give an analogy per se, but I love the analogy you gave. Right now we have tons of blockchains, aka countries, but we don't have a lot of container ships that talk to each other, that allow the transferability of goods, products, services, you name it, from country to country. That's the big issue right now. So many incredible blockchains, whether they're L1s or L2s, but it's a shit show when it comes time to talk to each other. Cross-chain communication, interoperability, both on sort of the financial side and on the messaging side. And that's where ZetaChain comes in and fixes this issue. Is that sort of the big pizzam there?
Yeah, and I think the past few years, we've seen a lot of innovation in this space. And again, to bring up these analogies, we might equate that to something like a trade agreement, like the EU as an entity. Like everything in Cosmos space can talk to each other. But there's nothing that is more agnostic, more like Swift in like the economic global world, or again, the internet, that's actually just completely independent of space. So that's the next evolution we're trying to get to. I think the freight ships kind of exist, but not the actual layer that you can build on, or the agreed on system that everyone could kind of adopt to move things around.
Gotcha. And in order for this to happen, you need incredible developers to come and build on your product, service, blockchain, whatever sort of buzzword you want to call it. But I'd love for you to talk to me about just, your ethos, which, if my research is correct, it's really about just empowering the devs to create these incredible bridges, product services that allow cross-chain communication, interoperability on a multitude of different chains, EVM, you name it. Walk me through how you guys are empowering devs to, create the next best product to actually allow different chains to talk to each other.
Totally. Yeah. So I think in theory, there's kind of basic message passing that exists today where you can deploy a bunch of smart contracts on different places and like build this graph of logic and managing assets across all of these different chains. Even that has some restrictions, like you don't have access to non-smart contract chains like Bitcoin, for example, which is a pretty hot topic nowadays. For us, we are aiming to simplify that building process for developers. So a lot of times today you see this word thrown around like chain abstraction or like simplifying the UX. We're taking an approach that's more like simplifying the developer experience at an infrastructure level to let you build that simple UX. So with ZetaChain, you don't have to deploy all these different places. You can deploy one contract on ZetaChain that can manage all of your logic as if all of these assets were in one place. So
Wow.
really basic example is Uniswap. You have a pool of one asset against another, right? This DEX pool. Usually that's all on one chain, like on Ethereum, on the original deployment. That's how it works. But with ZetaChain, you could have Bitcoin against some Solana meme coin and trade directly. So if I had Bitcoin on my ledger, I could trade and output directly to a Solana wallet of some, what are the hot ones, like Popcat or something directly.
Yeah. That's massive.
But all of the logic, everything is just as if you're deploying a smart contract on Ethereum. It's just now you have exposure to everything. You can program things across many different chains. So that also bubbles up to user experience where I can just have a wallet on ZetaChain and that can hold my Bitcoin, that can hold my Popcat, Ethereum assets, etc. So I think that lowers the barrier to building a lot of more interesting applications that are actually useful or have some benefit for users rather than being like, oh, I just need to go on this one chain because it's hot right now and there's a lot of opportunity. And then the next day
Lets you do it all.
Yeah, exactly.
That's wild. You brought up one point that tickles my fancy a lot here, and that is unlocking DeFi potential, for Bitcoin. Obviously the biggest crypto, the biggest blockchain by a country mile. I mean, I don't even really call it a blockchain because it's really just, it doesn't do a whole lot besides just a store of value right now. And it's pretty darn easy to send as well. And one of the big issues is that there's no DeFi on Bitcoin. All of the other big dogs, I guess with the exception of XRP, which we still really have no clue why it's ripped. I don't know, maybe you do, but with the exception of XRP, all the other big dogs have billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars of DeFi locked in. The TVL is super high. It's very powerful. You guys have your universal EVM, which allows developers to build, again, super complex things in a non-complex way that allows different assets to trade against and with and for Bitcoin, which is huge. I'd love for you to walk me through how you guys made this happen and what you sort of think the future of Bitcoin-based DeFi might look like.
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, in short, the way ZetaChain connects to other chains is chain agnostic. And also the model ZetaChain's adopting is all of the logic is on ZetaChain.
Right.
And it just needs input and output from Bitcoin. So for the Bitcoin example, say I want to earn yield on my Bitcoin. How do people usually do that? You LP, you lend, something in that nature. Now I can just lend my Bitcoin to a lending market on ZetaChain. I can always off ramp it out to my ledger again, but I can just earn yield on there, or I could borrow against it and say I want to borrow USDC on Solana so I can go trade memes, but still hold my Bitcoin position. That's totally possible. So if you want to look at it at a different angle, you could think of ZetaChain as like a universal L2. And I use the word or the term L2 lightly because I don't know if there's full consensus on what that means. But essentially you can program or add logic to other chains without needing to deploy on those chains. And that's especially important for Bitcoin where you cannot do that. And then on top of that, you can program Bitcoin against other chain assets or data. So, I mean, ultimately it is an open programming environment. So sky's the limit on what you can build. I think things like portfolio managers or yield aggregators are going to be really important, especially for the Bitcoin case, because people are going to want to manage that position against the growing array of other opportunities. But it is very complicated, especially if you're not. I mean, I'm sure you can navigate it fine, but from the majority of people, it is very difficult just mentally to hop between these different networks right now.
What's a shit show? And the whole, even the bridging experience. I remember the first couple times I used to bridge back in, I guess that would have been 2020 probably. I mean, you're just praying. It's like the first time you send a transaction on chain where you're just praying that it shows up on the other end. Right. So
it's just magic.
Literally, it's a magic hole. Right. We had the wormhole team on not too long ago, an incredible team as well. And it's just it's literally a wormhole. I'm praying that what I put in this hole comes out the other end. It's wild. Back to Bitcoin. One last thing on Bitcoin, and then we'll jump into some more fun stuff here. But the future of Bitcoin-based DeFi. I know you touched a bit about it, but Is it ever going to touch, maybe not Ethereum levels because ETH has such a leg up on the competition, but is it going to touch Solana levels? Could it ever touch ETH levels? Will it be a hub? Are we going to see a bunch of Bitcoin meme coins that are actually powerful? You know, NFTs and the whole ordinals thing, everyone said it was going to be the next thing. It's sort of a joke. Like, are we going to see Bitcoin that's not just Bitcoin? Are we going to see Bitcoin DeFi in the future?
Yeah, I'm kind of in two minds on this. I think there is a lot of innovation and opportunity and kind of adding data to your sats or like to your UTXOs. But I think it's very difficult for that to turn into something that is like more fully programmable or useful for like an end user. Like the lending use case is very difficult to imagine just in that bubble. I think you need this programmability layer, and that's kind of what ZetaChain is trying to build. Yeah. And also exposure to other assets. Like ultimately, as you said, Bitcoin is primarily this store of value, at least in the minds of consumers or investors in general. So to me, the utility of that is like bringing that store of value to the broader programmable world of crypto, hopefully in a very user-friendly way. But that's kind of how I imagine it. And I think the same for some of these like derivative or like add-on things in Bitcoin land. So like runes, BRC20s, all of that, I think could also be used against the rest of crypto. But by itself, I think it ends up boiling down to like someone could create their own centralized marketplace that's kind of indexing these runes or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it needs that. And if it's centralized, I think it's less interesting. If it's something where it's permissionless, decentralized, ZetaChain, or I guess even some bridges nowadays, that's long tail where I think it needs to go.
Gotcha. Well said there. Brandon, you're in a role. We got to take a quick break and give a huge shout out to our sponsor of the show, PrimeXPT. And when we get back, we are going to keep buzzing on everything cross-chain comms, interoperability, ZetaChain, and of course, universal apps and how we build them, which we haven't touched on yet. Until then, huge shout out to PrimeXPT, longtime friends and longtime sponsors of the Crypto News Pod. We love the team at PrimeXPT, as they offer a robust trading system for both beginners and professional traders. It doesn't matter if you're a rookie or a vet, you can easily design and customize your layouts and widgets to best fit your trading style. PrimeXPT is also running an exclusive promo for listeners of the Crypto News podcast. The promo code is CryptoNews50. That's CryptoNews50, all one word, to receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. Again, that's CryptoNews50, all one word, to receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. And now back to the show with Brendan. Let's jump into universal apps, something that is super interesting as well. And again, I'm not a dev in any capacity, never have been, never will be. Well, maybe with AI, I can literally write a script and crank out, some cool stuff. But devs are the backbone of the space. We still have yet to find our sort of killer product market fit, that sort of killer consumer app in crypto. We still don't have it. We have stablecoins, we have centralized exchanges, but we don't have that Facebook, that Instagram, that Snapchat, that thing that really creates a stupendous amount of FOMO, besides the price action and just the fact that everything goes up a good chunk of the time. With that being said, we need to continue to empower developers to create these apps, and teams like you guys are doing it. Walk me through what universal apps are and how the heck you guys build them. When I was doing research for the show, this looked so easy from a dev standpoint. Still hard for me, but if I was a dev, I'd be using these. You got to tell us exactly what universal apps are and how they are built.
Yeah, so like I said, ZetaChain is this programming environment where you can deploy in a single place. And a universal app is an app in that ZetaChain environment that can be accessed from any chain, and then that can also orchestrate things and manage things across any chain. So what that bubbles up into is I have an app, I'm deploying Uniswap or like a Uniswap fork on ZetaChain. And I'm using this as like it's kind of like the rudimentary or like most participle example, but I deploy that on ZetaChain, and from Bitcoin, from Solana, from Ethereum, from Cosmos chains, etc., I could interact with that app without needing to change my wallet. And then that app can also orchestrate things across many different chains. So Uniswap is maybe too simple of an example. It's just, I'm trading this for that. But say you have a portfolio manager, I'm depositing my Bitcoin. I want it to just basically act as a robo trader for me. And I think we can get into like the AI stuff. I think that's actually like a very cool use case. But basically I have my cash or my Bitcoin. I want to like optimize my yield across all the different crypto opportunities. I don't want to manage that. But a developer can say, okay, I'm going to deploy an app, deposit your Bitcoin, and I will convert some to ETH to do staking, convert some to some stables to do some LP, etc., and return all of the yield to you. All of that can be done in essentially one smart contract on ZetaChain. So like access is very important for us. So I should be able to call that or deposit to that contract from anywhere without needing to change networks. And then in theory, the app should be like fat. Like it can manage things across all these different chains. I, as a user, don't need to do this, but a universal app should be able to navigate universally and be accessed universally. So yeah, that's kind of what it is. And maybe just one more thing, like how it is built. It's really as if you're deploying on one chain. Like I just deploy the smart contract on ZetaChain. There's certain functions or like things you'll have to implement to accept a call from a different chain. But beyond that, it's kind of like if you were deploying on Ethereum, but you have these tentacles into other chains to work with very easily.
Gotcha. Very interesting. Brennan, we are getting a little tight for time here. A couple more questions and we will wrap up, my friend. You mentioned AI, and I love that sort of use case that you brought up. What do you think the future of AI in crypto looks like? And I mean, heck, if you want to segue and talk about the banana land stuff that's going on with the bots right now, AI XBT is probably my favorite one. I mean, I've even learned a bunch of like quality shit from AI XBT. I've been fact checking it. It's right most of the time. Very, very powerful stuff. The part of AI in crypto that interests me the most is sort of what you've touched upon, where I can just use one of these agents to trade that will most definitely be 100 times better than I can, and hopefully just print some money. But what do you think the future of AI in crypto looks like in your eyes?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's two sides to me. One is on the interface side. So obviously like interacting with networks and wallets is difficult. If you have an easier interface, and I think this applies broader than crypto, where you can just ask commands in real language. That's been a pipe dream for builders for a while, and now it actually kind of is possible. That's one. So, hey, I want to convert this to that. I don't need to use the UI. I just ask the agents to do that. Second is more on like the asset management side. I think, like I was saying it before, I think in the long term, it basically turns into like robo traders or like portfolio managers,
100%.
like Wealthfront. Right now, I mean, it's kind of the Wild West. Like, I don't know if I'd trust my funds with the current level of agents, but maybe like give it a few months or a year or something. And I think we'll start to see something more like an on-chain Wealthfront, where it really is, like I was saying, you deposit your assets, it manages. It's like ingesting all of the data and trades for you essentially, or portfolio manages for you. So I think that's really cool. Of course, there's probably a lot of creator tooling and like more social things that are interesting too, like all of the agents with their own Twitters and all of that.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's insane and a little hard to follow, but I'm sure something very interesting will come out of that as well. But to me, it'll essentially boil down to those two key verticals, at least as like the most utility forward ones.
Yeah, well said there. Another thing I'd love to discuss is, and again, we're getting very tight for time here. On November 15th, you guys, Zeta, became the 6th token recognized by Dubai Financial Services Authority. That's pretty freaking cool. All the other ones that got recognized were literally blue chip big dogs. Not to say that you guys aren't, but literally they were like, to my knowledge, the top 5 coins in the world. What does this mean for you and the team? How did you make this happen? This got to be pretty freaking cool news and a pretty freaking cool acknowledgement.
Yeah, it was really cool news. And yeah, I mean, I think one thing that's really important to ZetaChain and the contributor team is doing things correctly. Like even for product side, like we didn't talk much about it, but like our Zeta Hub, like how people explore the ecosystem, like how rewards are given out to people. We spend a lot of time thinking about compliance and regulation and making sure people are kind of safe, especially when interacting with stuff that we are directly in control of. And that bubbles up into the chain itself where I mean, we're not in control of the chain, but like we want the ecosystem and the mechanisms that it supports to have room for, I don't want to say like want it to be like completely regulated or censored because it's not, but to have that like level of safety for users. So security is pretty much the highest priority in anything that is built on product, on protocol, even in comms. Like we avoid anything that adds risk to people. And I think the DFSA approval is kind of just a nod to that. Like we are building for ultimately like people to use the thing. So we don't want it to be unsafe in any way, whether it's on a technical level or like more in an economics level.
Absolutely love that. Last thing, any news, any big announcements, good stuff to give us some goods on before we let you go? Mind you, this episode will air mid-December, so a couple days after this airs, but any news that's going to pop off between now and then?
Yeah, I mean, if you keep an eye on our X or Twitter, like Zeta Blockchain is the username, a bunch of apps have been and will be launching in the ecosystem, ranging from like NFT gaming stuff to more pure DeFi utility stuff. So that's very exciting. And related to that, it's been announced already. Like it's already on testnet, but what the contributor team is working towards right now is launching what we call gateway upgrades. And that is like a complete overhaul of the interfaces you would use as a developer to build universal apps. And it also unlocks this kind of orchestration piece. So the ability to use assets on other chains on behalf of a user. Not to get too technical, but it kind of unlocks that portfolio manager level of app building. So that's super exciting. And as that goes to mainnet, which I think is slated for December, in like the upcoming software upgrade, we'll see like hopefully a lot of people start to build on that. And of course, like if you're watching this, happy to chat if you reach out how or what you can build. Our team's always in Discord, ready to help. And yeah, very excited about that. I think it'll take some time for people to build now that it's on mainnet, but once people do start building it, I think this whole vision of what we're calling universal apps will kind of start to finally manifest after this past year of a lot of like infrastructure building out the baseline of the chain and ecosystem.
That's so cool. Happy for you and the team, man. Again, great episode. Really appreciate you coming on. Also, quick question. Are you not on Twitter? I tried to find you.
I am on Twitter, but I am a pure lurker. So
gotcha.
It's probably not worth following.
You have one of those anon accounts with 400,000 followers who can literally move the market in one tweet.
I wish.
All right, strictly anon. Well, Brandon, before we let you go, please let us know where listeners can find you personally. I guess plug your LinkedIn and of course ZetaChain online and on socials, and plug the Twitter. I mean, heck, you guys got 1 million followers on Twitter too, which is absolute bananas.
Yeah, my username across most socials is BTROO. Be true. It's an old nickname. But again, yeah, I'm not on social very much. But if you want to check out ZetaChain, our username across most platforms is @ZetaBlockchain. So ZETA blockchain. ZetaChain.com, of course. You can check out everything else. And yeah, we're pretty active across Twitter and Discord especially. So if you want to get involved, that is the place to get involved. Discord. I'm also in there. So that's probably where you can best find me.
I love it. Amazing stuff, folks. What an episode with Brandon Truong, co-founder of ZetaChain. We touched a little bit of everything on this episode. The first universal blockchain, unlocking DeFi potential for BTC, interoperability, user experience, cross-chain comms, and the future of AI and crypto. You name it, we touched it. Huge shout out to Brandon and the team for making this happen. If you guys enjoyed this one, I hope you did. Please do subscribe. It would mean the world to my team and I. Speaking of the team, love you guys. Thank you so much for everything. And back to the listeners, keep on growing those bags and keep on staying happy, healthy, and wealthy. Love you guys. Thanks for tuning in as always, and we will see you on the next one. Ciao.